You're listening to The Collected Podcast, bringing you stories that remind us who God is and who we are in Him. The Collected Podcast is a production of Collected Ministries, a nonprofit organization dedicated to helping disciples of Jesus discover and live from their true identity in Christ, recognize and walk in their divine purpose within the kingdom of God, and experience growth in their capacity for mature, healthy relationships. Follow Collected on social media at Collected Ministries, and be sure to visit thecollectedpodcast.com for show notes and additional content related to today's episode.
Welcome to Season 4, Episode 11 of the Collected Podcast. I'm your host, Ben Biondo, and this week I am bringing you a conversation with Gaddini, Dr. Katie Gaddini. She is a sociologist and writer based at the University College London. And she's also the author of the new book, The Struggle to Stay, Why Single Evangelical Women Are Leaving the Church. And I am so excited to have this conversation with Katie because I feel like it's going to be different than anyone we've had yet on this podcast. And I'm just excited to see what God does with it. So Katie, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks, Jess. It's so great to be here.
Yes, I'm excited to have you. And so before we get started and talk about your book, I was wondering if you could give our listeners a little bit of background about who you are and your faith journey.
Yeah, certainly. So as Jess mentioned, I'm a researcher, I'm an academic and professor based in London, but as you can tell from my accent, I'm originally from the US. So I grew up in California, and I actually grew up a pastor's daughter and a pastor's niece. So there's a lot of pastors in my family, and grew up going to church every single week and went to Christian schools, Christian college, and my whole wider family is evangelical Christian as well. So you could say it was a bit of a and then in my 20s, I actually moved over to Boston for graduate school and just started to question some things about the faith, more so because I felt I had a lot of struggles within the church as a single woman, actually, and all the things that come along with dating and finding a husband and things like that. And so it led me on a really interesting journey of my faith. And I attended a lot of different churches over the next 5 years. So I grew up Baptist, but I hopped from denomination to denomination. I lived in Spain for a little bit and was an elder for the first time at a church there. I should say as well, I grew up in a church that didn't support women in leadership. And I did believe in it. So it was really exciting for me to have a leadership role in the church. And then I moved to London in my late 20s and really tried finding a church that fit my beliefs around Christianity, and had a really hard time, and some experiences in the church that just really burned me, which I know is something that happens to a lot of people. Around the same time, I started this research for my PhD on single women in the church, and hearing a lot of stories of pain and a lot of sadness, and actually stopped going to church at that point, and haven't been a regular churchgoer since then. I still really invested in Christianity. I'm really invested in, I would say my life's work is really about making the church more inclusive, and especially for women. And I'm still have a close pulse on what's going on in the church, but myself, I'm not a regular churchgoer anymore. And I talk about that a lot in my book of my own story.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit more about your book, The Struggle to Stay, and I guess the heart behind why you wrote it, and then a little bit about what it's more about.
Yeah, so it's based on the research I did for my PhD. And my PhD was with single women in the US and in the UK. And I did long-term, about 4 years of research with these women. And I went in, having had my own negative experiences and been a bit burned, kind of with an axe to grind, you could say. And I wanted to do this research and write this account that really took down the church, that kind of set it on fire. And what I found as my research went on is that wasn't an accurate portrayal of what I was finding. For a lot of women, the church is a tremendously healing place. It's a place of community. It's a place of freedom. And I couldn't write this account that just was fully negative about the church. It wasn't reflected back in the stories I was hearing. Mm-hmm. And I came to have a much wider and deeper appreciation for the church, I would say, as a place that is messy, where there is a lot of hurt, but there is a lot of healing and freedom and beautiful things that happen in community. So when it came time to write the book, I wanted to tell that full picture. And I also wanted to bring my own story into it, because I was interviewing all of these women about, why do you stay in the church when you have grievances? And I needed to explore as well my own story of, well, why did I leave the church, to fully understand why these women would stay? So I complicate the idea of staying and leaving. And I also hope that I present what it's like to be a single woman in the church in all of its fullness, warts and all.
Yes. I mean, this is fascinating to me because I am a single woman in the church.
Okay.
I'm in a wonderful dating relationship now, but, still check single on tax forms. And I'm 35, so never been married. And I don't know, I'm interested to hear like what common themes stood out among these women, in both their grievances, but then also the ways that they found hope and community.
Yeah. So I'm glad you told me your age, because that's actually 35 is a real crucial number I found for women. So it's kind of this point where women who aren't dating or can't find someone to date start to get really discouraged. And I should say I did the majority of my research in big cities. So London, New York, where people do tend to marry a little bit later. Sure. I'm currently doing research in a really small town where I'm noticing the average age is a lot younger. But 35 is usually the age where women who can't find a suitable partner aren't getting asked out on dates, aren't dating, feel really discouraged, and they start to question their participation in the church. So this can take many forms. So for some women I met, it means going late to church and leaving early. So they don't really engage with other people at church. For some women, it meant skipping Sundays, kind of going ad hoc. Other women feel really determined, though, to stick in there. They have a lot of hope that God will bring them a husband, and they want to stick in there and have their presence be accepted and valued in the church, even though they might feel a little bit discouraged. So I saw a real mix of ways to react, but 35 seemed to be a crucial age where some women were making hard choices, I would say. And at the same time, for a lot of women, church was everything for them. And I remember that myself when I was still really involved in the faith is church is your main friendships, your main source of support. You might go multiple times a week. And so to have the option of leaving is a really difficult choice and really painful choice. You're not just leaving something you do on a Sunday. This is your whole world. This is your whole community. But what do you do when you don't feel as welcomed in your community anymore? And it presents a really difficult tension for a lot of women.
Yeah. And you keep referring to the church as well. Did you find that with these women and in your study that there was a distinction between like a personal relationship with God versus their role in a church community?
Absolutely. So that's a great distinction to make. And women would tell me time and time again, especially women who ended up leaving the church or had this kind of inconsistent participation. They would say, my relationship with God is really stable. I have a close relationship with God. We are in conversation all the time. That hasn't changed. The thing that's changed is the way I engage in the church and my participation in the church. And so even women that were kind of doing these different creative tactics, like leaving late and coming late and leaving early, they still felt that their relationship with God was unwavering. That hadn't shifted at all. And even when people that left the church maintained that relationship with God. So it wasn't about God. It wasn't about even core Christian beliefs and the Trinity and Jesus and Scripture. It was about the church as a community of believers and feeling unwelcomed there at times.
Yeah. And it's so hard because the church is made up of imperfect people. There's no perfect church. Yeah. And yet, how do we still, be a part of it?
Yeah.
Even when it hurts us or fails us. And what conclusions did the women come to? Like, Does that question make sense?
Yeah, it does. I think they've
like, how do you reconcile the pain you felt versus?
Yeah. Well, that's a trade-off. And that's the trade-off that a lot of women are facing. And I think that increases as women get older and maybe fail to find a husband and really deeply want that. The church really does, the Christian church really does value marriage and value children. And so if you're not meeting those ideals, it can feel oftentimes a lonely place. So that's kind of the trade-off that women have to contend with, or if they find a different community, a different church community where they feel a little bit more welcomed. I think, though, if we look at the numbers in the US and the UK, there are more women going to church than men. And so statistically speaking, it is going to be harder for matches to be made. And there are going to be women who there aren't enough men. So that's a reality, I think, also that we have to look at and say, well, if you want to marry a Christian man, but there's not any options, what do you do? And so that's another trade-off that women have to contend with. Do I go look outside the church for someone? Do I just stay single? Do I keep hoping that someone will come along? There's different amounts of time that I think women are willing to wait. And then, as I said, kind of that magic number of 35 is where people start making different moves.
Did you find anything about like Christian men tending to be non-committal?
Yes,
was that a trend?
It was a major trend in both countries. So I have to say I didn't interview men. So I don't know.
Fair. So we don't have their perspective.
I have like male Christian friends that I would talk to about the research. So I have kind of anecdotal stories. But that was a consistent theme in both countries that really surprised me, because I would hear almost the exact same stories from women in two different countries, that men wouldn't commit or that they would kind of play games. There was stringing along. There was this idea of, if we go for a coffee date, they think that, we want to get married, but we don't. We're women feeling pigeonholed into these categories of being super intense and marriage minded. And on the converse side of that, feeling that men were being really flaky around dating and not taking it seriously, and frustration with that.
Yeah, I have experienced some of that in my life.
Something you can relate to, Jess?
That is something I can relate to. And, my own like personal dating history, I guess in my 20s, I wanted to be married so bad. I thought I'd get married right out of college. I went to a small Christian school. So to like exit that without a husband was like, what did I do wrong? And, I just wanted to be married so badly. But I continued to pick men who I feel like I had to change myself to fit what they wanted. And great Christian men that I dated in my 20s. If any of them are listening, which would be weird, but if you're listening, nothing but respect for you. But I wasn't my truest self with them because I wanted so badly marriage that I was willing to become somebody different from who God created me uniquely to be.
Yeah.
And when I was 29, I discovered the Enneagram.
Oh, yes.
And from what I've been saying, maybe you can guess I'm a 2, molding myself to be what other people need or what I perceive other people to need. And that revolutionized my view of myself and completely changed who I was in my relationships because I knew who I was and I could remain rooted in that.
Yeah.
And so, part of my single journey, I think, was in my 20s, God's protection of like knowing I wasn't ready, which was a hard lesson to learn. But on the other side of it, it's always worth it.
Yeah.
But I know you are kind of interested in the Enneagram, and I was wondering how that has influenced your identity work.
Yeah, I love the Enneagram. I first discovered it in Peru, actually. I was volunteering with a Christian organization right after college and came across it. And it just blew my mind. I felt like I was being so exposed there on the page. And I was like, I hope other people don't read this. It's like my deepest feelings being exposed. So I'm a 1 on the Enneagram. I am the perfectionist. I do have a 2 wing, so I can connect with you on that.
Yes.
I would say for me, the way I see it come out in my work is that I have this strong sense of right and wrong, and this strong drive for justice. and perfection. We are the perfectionists, even though I don't like that label. So I think this can come from a really good place insofar as, definitely with my work with the church is I want the church to be better. I want it to improve it. Sometimes we're called the improvers as a one. There's a clear sense of what's right for the church in my mind, and I want the church to get there. And I can be somewhat uncompromising on that. So the negative side of that is that, the church is made up of imperfect people. I am a very imperfect person. And I need to become more comfortable, I think, with these gray spaces and with the knowledge that change takes time. And, reaching perfection or reaching betterment doesn't happen all at once. And so that's really my growth area that I'm leaning into.
That's good. Thank you for sharing that. I noticed if people are watching our video, that you have a ring on a finger. Are you married? Talking about
I am married. I got married
singleness.
in August. And my husband's actually 2 on the Enneagram. So he's smiling in the background right now. Yes, I'm almost 38 this year. So I got married a lot later than is the kind of norm in Christian circles. And I'm kind of the opposite of you, Jess. When I was in my 20s and finished my Christian college, I did not want to be married. So I dated some really wonderful Christian men as well. So if they are listening, I have nothing but respect for them. They're really great guys. But I just didn't want to get married. I felt really young. I wanted to travel. I was very focused on my career. And I felt this tremendous pressure, not necessarily from the guys, but from the church and from in our Christian community to be married, and just did not feel like I was ready for that at all. So I'm somewhat of a late bloomer in that sense, but I'm really glad that I got married when I did and married what I consider to be definitely the right person and definitely someone that was worth the wait.
Yes. How did you meet?
We met on a dating app, as most people do in London. Yeah. I had done multiple rounds of dating apps and did a round with a friend, and we kind of did it lightheartedly for fun, and met my husband. Was like the first person that I met on there, and then quickly got off the app. So I'm a poster child for the apps. What can I say?
Yes. And so much of it is just about timing. I mean,
totally. When you're ready, when they're ready. And I think I'd reached a place too where I finally really wanted to find someone. And I hadn't felt that before. It took me, we met when I was almost 35. So it took me that long to really want to be in that kind of committed relationship, to make sacrifices for another person. I was very much like, this is where I'm going and this is what I'm doing. And if they want to come along, great, but I'm not changing any of my plans for someone else. And then meeting my partner, my husband now, was the first person I felt like, I want to make this a priority, and I'll do whatever I need to do to make that happen, whether it involves moving different places or, I just applied for British citizenship. So it was choices I was willing to make for someone else.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. So what maybe word of hope or encouragement might you have for single women, to circle back to your book, who are struggling in their Christian community or just struggling with these unmet longings?
The first thing I'd say is you're not alone. So when I would often finish an interview, I would ask a woman, do you have any questions for me? And one woman said to me, are my answers normal? Did anyone else say things similar? And I said, your answers are so on par with what everyone else is telling me. And I could just see how relieved she was. It was almost like a weight was lifted off her shoulders when I said that, in knowing that she wasn't alone in her feelings of wanting a relationship, of feeling disappointed and discouraged that wasn't happening, and feeling that she wasn't as valued in her church because of that. So I wrote this book hoping, my deepest hope is that women read it, and if they are struggling, that they feel this sense of they're not alone in that. There's other women like them, and that isn't necessarily a prescription for how involved you should be in your church community, but it's a sense that you're not the only one that feels this way. And hopefully that gives some encouragement to women.
Yeah, that's good. What would you say your life message is then?
Kind of what I mentioned earlier. So I really do want the church to be a more welcoming space. I want it to be a place that's more inclusive. I think there are so many wonderful and beautiful aspects of the church and of church community. It's really singular. And I talk about this in my book. There's nothing else quite like it. There's other communities you can join, sports clubs or work or colleagues or things like that. But there's something unique that the church community can give you that I think there's no other replacement for it in society. So I don't want it to be a choice between, do I stay and feel kind of devalued, or do I leave and lose this beautiful community? And I'd like the church to be more welcoming and open to people who maybe haven't found a life partner and maybe won't find one, but still be valued for the contributions they bring.
Yeah, that's good. That is a beautiful life message. Our tagline on the show is collecting stories that remind us of who God is and who we are in Him. So you can answer this personally, or maybe from the things you collected from the women in your book. But what things did either they or you reveal about who God was in their lives and who God is?
I would say the main thing that came across really strongly is God is a God of love and not one who requires you to be perfect. And women talk about their failings, not measuring up, failings in the community. And yet they had a really strong sense of forgiveness and love from God. Whether or not they were still involved in church, whether or not they were fighting the church actively from inside it, they felt really supported and loved and close to God throughout that journey. And that was really beautiful to see. There wasn't this sense of hiding or shame. It was a deep sense of value.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
That is so good. Well, what have I missed? What is something I can't let you leave without sharing, either from your book or just something else that you've learned about God and the church throughout this whole journey?
So something else that occurs to me about kind of what was revealed about God's character through the study is a lot of women felt really called to church leadership. And I even met one woman who didn't theologically believe in women in leadership and yet felt this calling and couldn't reconcile that, and had her male pastor tell her, listen, I think God's calling you to church leadership. And she was like, but I don't theologically agree with it. So this is another tension that comes up in the book, and that I think is a reality for a lot of women, is feeling called to ministry, and perhaps not being supported in that calling, or not having opportunities to fulfill that calling. And I'd really like to see more women be able to live that calling out. And especially, I think they need a lot of support to get there, especially in churches where they don't maybe have a lot of women in church leadership. And not everyone does feel called to church leadership, and not everyone should be called to it, frankly. But I think for people that really do have that strong calling on their life, to be able to fulfill that, it would be really exciting to see.
Yeah. And what an interesting thought process too, when we feel like God is calling us to something, but then it doesn't line up with what theologically we've been taught in our denomination our whole lives.
Right.
And then having to deconstruct our faith and see, okay, is this not really from the Lord, what I'm feeling?
Yeah.
Or was I taught bad theology?
Right.
And that, I mean, have you seen that? Or how do people work through that deconstruction process?
I think it's painful, and I think it can be really hard. In the particular example I just gave, this woman had, the male pastor at her church who was encouraging her and who was really putting her forward. So I think that was less of a challenge because she had that support. Yeah. But I think for women that feel the calling and theologically maybe can't reconcile it, or are trying to theologically grapple with it, but they don't have any support around them, it can be an isolating experience. And some women remove themselves from the church setting while they're doing that deconstructing before they move back into it and can figure out what their place is. So I don't know if that's, what approach is the right one to do. I don't think there is a right approach, but I think I definitely did see that sense of like, I can't work this out while I'm in the church community. So I need to step outside of it. I need to figure out where I am, what I believe, and then I can find a community that matches that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's important for women to know, like, that's okay.
Yeah.
Like, God can honor whatever path you're on. And if you need to step away from the church you're in right now, that doesn't make you any less a Christian. That doesn't discount your love for God or take away his love for you. Like, I think there's someone out there who needs to hear that right now, that what they're struggling with, they're not alone, like you said. Yeah. And it's okay to ask those questions and to wrestle with those really hard, like, discrepancies that you may be seeing.
And I'd say it's okay to walk through different seasons. Not everything has to be linear. I know, as I mentioned, the pandemic's really brought up a lot for women in their faith, for Christians in general. It's caused some, to step outside of regular church going because they see it online now, or they engage with church online, or maybe they find their spiritual nourishment from their Bible study group rather than from Sunday services. Some are really eager to get back into Sunday services. The pandemic shifted people's way of church going and engaging with Christian faith in a huge way. And I think it's raised a lot of questions for people as well. So I would just echo what you said, Jess, that wherever you're finding yourself right now, whatever the pandemic has thrown up for you or the past few years have thrown up for you, that's okay too. And that's part of the journey, that it's not a landing point.
Yeah. And I think the pandemic, like church in the pandemic, has almost brought us back to the early church in Acts of like meeting with small groups in houses, and the church flourished and God was working. Like, we don't have to meet with 1,000 other people in order to be church. Like, I think it's gotten us back to some really important roots that we had lost with the growth of the mega church. Not that there's necessarily anything right or wrong with those, so maybe a whole different conversation. But I think there's something beautiful God did in, the horrible experience of the pandemic, but bringing us back to a more simplistic view of community.
Yeah, I'd say there's been a huge restructuring going on rather than, this binary of leaving and staying. There's people are reshuffling how they engage in Christian community, and community might be really small. It might be your 3 closest girlfriends that you go for walks with and talk about your faith. And that can be a really beautiful way.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. Well, thank you so much, Katie. Before I let you go, I was wondering what you're working on next. If you can tell us what's on your horizon or what's next for you.
Yeah. So I'm switching gears now, and I'm actually looking at faith and politics. So, the last 6 years or so have been a point of great fracture in the United States and great fracture in the church as well around different political issues. So I'm doing interviews with Christians all over the country, and I'm looking at how faith impacts politics and also what political issues are really important to Christians right now. So interviewing men as well as women this time, which is a big change for me. But it's been really interesting so far. And that'll be my next book, hopefully.
Wow. That's fascinating.
Yeah.
We'll have to have you on to talk about that. We never really get into politics in this show, but
yes, the two things we're not supposed to talk about, politics and religion. And I'm hitting both of them at the same time.
You really are. Yes. We focus on religion here and have left politics out of it.
Yeah, might be a good idea.
Yeah. I think God's bigger than our politics.
Yeah.
I just keep coming back to with all the division that, I need to be engaged. I need to be informed and have opinions and know why I have my opinions. But at the end of the day, I vote, and then this world is not my home. Like, not using that as an excuse to not stay engaged and informed. Yeah. But my hope is not in whoever is or isn't our current leader.
Right.
And I find peace in that.
Yeah. So, the delicate balance.
It is. It really is. Well, we will have to have you back on when that comes out.
I would love to. Thanks so much for the questions, for having this space. And I really appreciate it, Jess.
Yes, thank you. What a fascinating conversation with Katie. As I was talking to her, about this idea of singleness and connecting it to just any unmet longing that we have. Maybe you're out there married and yet you still resonated with maybe feeling some church hurt, or still something you desire that you haven't achieved that other people around you are. Maybe it's a child or a job, or I don't know, whatever your unmet longing is. I think what Katie was saying was so fascinating, and there was such wisdom and hope in it that you're not alone, and that God is love, that He is our provider. So when the church fails us, or when people fail us, or when a relationship fails us, God doesn't. And I've been digging into the name Jehovah Jireh, the Lord our provider. And we see it first in Genesis 22, 1 through 17, which is the story of Abraham when God asked him to sacrifice Isaac. And back in Genesis 12 is the story of the Abrahamic covenant, where God made a covenant with Abraham that Abraham would become a great nation. And Isaac was the beginning of the fulfillment of that covenant, because without children, you can't be a great nation. You need offspring. So when God was asking Abraham to sacrifice Isaac, in a sense, God was saying, do you trust me to fulfill my promise to you, even when it doesn't make sense? And I feel like sometimes when God wants to show us something new about His character and His ability to provide, He'll put us in a situation that might not make sense to us. And in that moment, I think that's the time to dig in, to worship, to get into His word, to spend time in stillness with Him, whatever you need to do, because I think He's up to something new that only He can solve. When it feels so far outside of our ability to fix or understand, I think there can be a little bit of excitement with that God is up to something new. And when we choose God, I think that's when He makes provisions for us, because He sees our complete commitment to Him. Now, I don't believe that means that, if you're faithful to God and you choose God, you're going to get what you wanted, because you might not get the husband or the child or the job or whatever the thing is. But God will make a way for you and provide for you in a way you could have never anticipated. And sometimes it's in very small things that we need to train ourselves to see, these small provisions that happen in our lives that can go unnoticed if we're not paying attention, if we're not looking for them. The silliest thing happened to me, but the other day I needed a dress for an event I'm going to, and I found this beautiful dress at Anthropologie, and it, was on sale for one price. And then I brought it to the register, and it was even cheaper than that. It was like really, really cheap, which if you shop at Anthropologie, never happens. And in that moment when it rang up way less than I anticipated, I felt like it was God seeing me and providing for me and knowing my financial needs. And it was so small and could have been missed. And maybe I was reading into it more, but it moved me to tears. Like, I got very emotional because I felt like it was God's provision. And it wasn't a husband, but it was a small moment where He reminded me, I see you and I will provide for even the silly things, even the worldly things. I don't know. So hopefully that brings some encouragement, and when God makes a promise, He will fulfill it. Like, He won't leave us hanging. Sometimes it's just hard to let go of what we thought it would look like. And I think that's where there's that grief for maybe the life you thought you'd be living and you're not. So I challenge you, and I'm not trying to be trite or belittle your pain or your desire, but I encourage you this week to try and look for moments of gratitude where you see God provide in maybe even the smallest way, because those things start to add up. And once you train your mind to start noticing God winking at you, we call it, you'll see it everywhere. And you'll realize how involved he is in our lives with the way that he provides. I don't know. So that's just some things that have been on my mind and heart this week. I hope you're having a wonderful week, and we will see you soon. Love you all. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Collected Podcast. Please be sure to subscribe, rate, and review. And if you like what you've heard, we'd love it if you'd help spread the word. Check back here for new episodes dropping every other Thursday. You can follow along on social media at Collected Ministries. You can also find Jess at Just Biondo. If you would like to support Collected by making a tax-deductible contribution, please visit collectedministries.org/donate. Collected proudly supports and partners with Flourish Kenya, a nonprofit working to support and prevent unplanned adolescent pregnancy in rural Kenya. Learn more at flourishkenya.org. The Collected Podcast is produced by Jess Biondo and edited by Jacob Early. Music is by S4E11.